Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how a fellow Tory MP completely stitched up the hapless Home Secretary Suella Braverman, as she had to admit that the safe legal routes she keeps suggesting asylum seekers take don't actually exist after all, and that the correct procedure does appear to get yourself to the UK by rubber dinghy if necessary. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this was quite spectacular. I've done a few videos on the legal realities of claiming asylum in the UK, especially recently. But the Tories and the far-right media try to claim that we've got safe routes, therefore anyone travelling across in boats is an illegal immigrant. Well, Braverman was put on the spot yesterday to select committee by a Tory MP, no less, Tim Loughton. And he said he would engage in a little bit of role play. Now, that's always a worrying move, because we don't really want to picture elderly male Tory MPs engaging in a bit of role play, you know what I mean? But this one turned out to be clean, so it's fine. He said he was going to imagine himself to be a 16-year-old orphan from a war-torn African country being persecuted for his religion. He had a sibling who was lawfully entitled to stay in the UK. He asked what was the safe and legal route to come to the UK. Braverman hesitated, then she tried to begin an answer, then she stopped herself and asked, well, which country are you fleeing from? Now, Loughton said he didn't want to name a specific country for fear of causing offence, but it didn't matter. A country in Africa which at a particular time was politically unstable and persecuting its young citizens like himself. So Braverman said, well, we have an asylum system and people can put in applications. So Loughton asked, how? So she persisted with her nonsense, probably thinking, well, there's no way a fellow Tory MP is going to stitch me up, I'll just waffle. So she said, well, you could do it through the safe and legal routes that we have. And Loughton said, well, which ones? She says, I'm not Syrian, not Afghan, not Ukrainian. You know, so those are the people for whom the UK has specific provision. Even then, it's not very good provision. But never mind that now. Loughton was asking about people outside of these three specific countries. And then it happened. Braverman said, well, if you can get to the UK, you can put in an application. Boom. The way to claim asylum with the UK is to get to the UK from the Home Secretary herself. You get yourself to the UK, then present your claim, and that's all fine. Oh, but that's illegal immigration, cried the gammons. In fact, Loughton actually queried this. He asked if that would mean entering the UK illegally. Braverman said that if you put in your application on arrival, that's the process. So asylum seekers coming across on a dinghy, because there are no other safe routes, because Braverman couldn't name any, can present their asylum application on arrival, presumably with the border force when they pick them up. And it's all fine and dandy, all fine. In fact, in the words of the Home Secretary, that's the system. But Loughton wanted it pinning down further. He didn't mention dinghies, but he asked how he could get to the UK if he couldn't get on an aircraft legally. Braverman then gave up and turned to one of her officials. Now, please bear in mind, these officials are only following instructions. They know this is insane. They would not be advocating this nonsense with a Home Secretary who had respect for the law. But the response was priceless nonetheless. One of her aides tried to help out, but broke out in uncontrollable stuttering.
I arrive in the UK if I didn't have permission to get onto an aircraft legally to arrive in the UK?
Let me just invite other colleagues if there's anything they want to add.
I mean,
Now, I don't know if they actually have a stutter, to be fair, but I'm imagining it was probably the result of their brain imploding in blind panic. He said, well, you could engage with UNHCR, but then admitted that that wouldn't actually be possible in every country. No. And in reality, the not possible in every country generally means not really possible in any war-torn country where the government is rampaging through their own land on a mission of religious persecution against their own citizens. The whole sorry mess badly exposed just by an MP asking a very simple question and then following it through. If only our journalists did the same thing on a consistent basis. But it's something, in a 2-minute video, you can easily now show anyone who buys this legal routes crap. You know, there's nothing party political about it. It's a Tory MP put in a scenario to a Tory minister. And it wouldn't matter if it was a Tory MP, because there's nothing tricky about it either. The Home Secretary was given every option to explain even a hypothetical safe and legal route. Was asked multiple times, was not able to even give a hypothetical route which would be both safe and legal, or one of the other. She even said that people crossing the channel by whatever means they feel necessary are following the correct procedure as long as they present their asylum claim on landing in the UK. So that's the legal situation cleared up by the Home Secretary and former Attorney General. Asylum seekers who cross the channel on a rubber boat are not illegal immigrants as long as they claim asylum once they reach the UK. But what about the political situation? Well, obviously, this isn't going to be widely reported in the gammon press. In fact, I gather the Daily Express did report on the Select Committee hearing, but it was not that bit. So there's not much danger of like millions of voters seeing it. But it does highlight what a clown show the government remains under Sunak. Yes, he's now got some adept ministers in cabinet. I mean, I actually watched Jeremy Hunt facing the Select Committee. And again, he had very tough questions put to him and he wasn't really able to answer. But he smiled and dodged them fairly expertly. You know, so Sunak does now have some adept ministers. The average IQ has definitely gone up. But he still has shitters like this. Braverman knew she was going to be asked about this. She's been dodging this committee for a while, by the way. This committee hearing was supposed to be a while ago. You know, and this is the reason why. She knew it was going to come up. And yet she hadn't bothered to come up with a response. She hadn't prepared. You know, it doesn't matter how ridiculous her response was. Her aim is to deceive in order to stir up hatred. She needs to at least come up with a response that will fool the misinformed amongst the public. There's lots of members of the public who don't want to harm genuine asylum seekers. They're being told that actually a load of these people aren't genuine asylum seekers. So what you need to do is come up with a response that allows people to carry on believing that. No one who watched that exchange could possibly come away believing it. You know, she's failed to do that. She failed to prepare. She was clearly trying to make up her responses on the fly, which no preparation. There was nothing polished about her response or that from her aide, and it still remains to be seen if Braverman's general attitude is even an asset for the Conservatives. You can imagine it is, in terms of the people they're trying to attract. But even if it is, her bumbling inability to answer simple questions about her policies from her own colleagues is very unlikely to be an asset. You know, there was a survey published on immigration this week. I've seen some reports which hugely mischaracterise the results, but that's journalists for you, for whom whatever little maths they ever learned has long since been forgotten. But the survey is very interesting nonetheless. It shows a much more positive view of immigration amongst the general public than existed a few years ago. I don't think that surprises me. You know, because the powers behind Brexit ramped up xenophobia to force us out of the EU. Now that it's done, now that much of that pressure has abated because they've got what they want, it's not actually a surprise to me that public attitudes have snapped back a bit. You know, the government's current rhetoric and stated policies towards asylum is out of kilter with public opinion. Doesn't mean it's out of kilter with their target voters. This survey doesn't explore that, which is one of the misconceptions that the journalists fail to understand. You know, but given that people with a very unsympathetic view of asylum seekers are very likely to vote for either the Conservative Party or Reform UK, you wonder what the attitude might be doing for swing voters. And let's be honest, the Conservatives ramping up the rhetoric on asylum, that may well fire up the xenophobes. In fact, you would imagine it would. But if they perceive that the government are ultimately failing to get a grip on the problem, and the government seems to have no intention of getting a grip on the situation, then aren't those voters more likely to go with Reform UK than Tories at the election? I'm not at all sure the Conservatives have got a handle on their strategy here at all. Just as with Labour, I can't know what their targeted polling results say. You know, that target voters are not necessarily following the same trends as the national polls. All we see are these national trends, because for a survey that's going to be published like this, that's all they're bothered about. They're not interested in targeting just the people who are likely to be target voters. But I am quite sure that the identifying strategic positions in politics is one thing, but implementing them is another. And if one of the most senior government ministers cannot even answer a simple question from an MP from her own party without making herself look like a right tit, I am going to say, I think it's fair to say, maybe the strategy is not being implemented very well. Because like I say, if you're thinking to yourself, the people I'm trying to target here, yes, they naturally align with the Conservative Party, but they also naturally align with Reform UK. And Reform UK are on the warpath at the moment. But anyway, there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.